Alrighty, hello and welcome to today's video. Today we'll be reacting about beans. You should go check this guy's channel out. Let's see. All right, go to the Midwest Gardener. Make sure to check his channel out. I just found this. Just yeah, beans.
This year I grew 5 different types of pole beans. In this video I'm going to show you each
That's
type
good.
of
That's
pole
good.
bean. I'm going to talk a little about what
Yeah,
I
long
think of
ones.
each type of pole bean. And I'm also going to show you each
There's
type
good
as they
consistency on that
grow
one.
through the season from the time I plant them until the time I harvest them. And I'll also talk a little
Some good
about
pole.
why I think some did better than others. Along with all of that, I'm going to give you my top 3 out of this 5 and tell you why I ranked them that way. Pole beans need something to climb on, so you can use actual poles, you can use a trellis,
I don't
or in
have
this
any
case I'm
photos on
using
them.
very large tomato cages that I made out of concrete reinforcement wire. I use wood chips as
That's
mulch in
very
my
creative.
garden, so the first thing I do is pull back the wood chips, and then I use my 4-tine hand cultivator to loosen up the soil just below the wood chip.
So this is a real farmer, I believe. I know as much about this as y'all do, so we're buckling on down and checking this out. Really looks like it's very interesting. He's got a water hose there. Make sure it's nice and watered, I think. And, it's a good gardening techniques for all the gardeners out there. Yeah, we're just, investigating on the
You can work in
beans.
some homemade compost or fertilizer into the soil before you plant your beans, or you can side dress after the beans have started to grow. I usually plant my pole beans about an inch or 2 deep and about 3 or 4 inches apart, but as you can see I don't do any measuring. Now the 5 types of beans I'll be
Nice.
planting in no particular.
When you're planning an album, I imagine you get the hang of things. And he's got a lot of beans there. And they're pretty nifty looking beans. I think my personal favorite type of bean is the lima bean, but I don't know if he has the lima bean here. So I would advise measuring until you get that full experience. Then again, don't take my advice because I have no idea what I'm talking about. I'm making this all up on the spot. So yeah, um, anyways, it's a real
Order.
professional at
The
work.
first is rattlesnake.
I don't think I really like rattlesnakes, but we'll see how these beans turn out.
Next is a purple variety called Carminat.
Oh,
Even though these
those
beans
are a
are
little
purple when you
longer.
pick them, they turn green when they're cooked. Third is a pole bean named Seychelles.
Oh,
It's an early producer that also has a long growing season. The Cherokee Trail of Tears bean is a bean with a very long history. This bean can be used as
I
a
actually
snap
might have
bean
had
or a
that
dried
before.
bean.
I'm not fully sure.
Finally, we have Monte Gusto, which is a yellow wax type pole bean. This bean grows pods that are very uniform in shape and size. I planted our pole beans around the 1st of May, and
That's
this is
just
what they
a
look like in the
beautiful, really
last week of
beautiful
May.
garden you got there.
The rows are running east to west, and I water them with drip irrigation. In the row to the left, I planted Monte Gusto, Cherokee Trail of Tears, and Seychelles.
I just like to point out right, I can't zoom in. Okay. Okay, well that was a little awkward. We almost just lost our feed, but that right there, which means I'm gonna have to edit it. Oh, dang it. That right there. That's a nice piece of mulch, that is. We're gonna go ahead and save that to files. No, actually, let's not. Let's save that to photos. I can move photos
In
later.
the next row to the right, I planted Carminat and Rattlesnake. Carminat was the first type to
Oh yeah,
actually start
rattlesnake with the brown
climbing.
ones with the.
By the first week in June, the Carminat was well over halfway up the cage, and the other types had already caught up.
See, the beans, in my mind, are kind of like vines, except they have little, like, flower buds that are edible. I know that sounds weird, but when you think about it, it's more of just like a vine. You see vines around, they climb on trees, and all sorts of stuff. And it's just very interesting. Very, very interesting. Oh, those are some really beautiful flowers you got there.
At this point, I added 4-foot bamboo stakes to the top of the cages because I knew the beans would grow well past the 5-foot cages. Less than a week later, they had all reached the bamboo stakes and had started to climb them. This is a look at the Carminat.
It's always been interesting to me how vines and whatnot will continuously twirl around until they find a place to latch on. It's a really interesting DNA of the beans. Yeah.
By the middle of June, the plants had already started to really fill out the bottom of the cages and had grown well up towards the top of the bamboo stakes. Being next to the fence really seemed to slow down the Seychelles pole beans. The Cherokee Trail of Tears, which is the one I'm showing here, and the Monte Gusto, which is just to the left of it, which I'm showing here, were doing much better, and were already starting to produce blooms. In the next
So you might notice they use a couple of zip ties. I think zip ties are actually very, very handy. So you should always, if you're trying to garden, keep a couple of zip ties. And
row I had melons planted next to the fence, which gave the Carminat an advantage over the Seychelles and the other row. As you can see, the blooms on it are very attractive. Even with the 5-foot cages and the bamboo extending 3 feet past the cages, they were running out of growing space. By the 3rd week in July, those 2 rows were starting to look like a jungle, as you can see. In the foreground of the left row are some cucumbers that I planted in a cage also. At this point in the growing season,
I would advise cucumber to you slice it, but you put a little butter in the pan, a little olive oil. You cook that up. Best going with something, I'd say. They're pretty good, but you want to make sure not too long, because you don't want to get them moist. You want them still crunchy. I mean, you can throw them in the air fryer if you have that. I think I have no idea, but that would be my advice on cooking them. I mean, I've never done this before, but I might have seen it done in my dreams.
all of the vines had started to produce quite a few small beans, but they're just very hard to see with all of that foliage. Now I'll show you some beans that I harvested on one day in the 3rd week of July. These are Monte Gusto beans, and as you can see, they produce some very attractive pods that were uniform in shape and size and very slender. The Monte Gusto pole beans were also very productive. In the next row, straight across from the Monte Gusto, were the rattlesnake pole beans. This one has to be picked often because it has a tendency to get large and produce beans inside the pods. Once those beans start to become fully formed, the pods can become a little bit leathery. But if picked about this size or smaller, I think they are really good. Here's one that started to form beans, and as you can see, the pod changes color a little bit, and those beans start to get pretty large, and the pods get just a little bit leathery. But just about every bean will do that if you leave it too long on the vine. Here are some of the Carminat pole beans, and as you can see, they grow some very long pods that stay fairly slender.
Pretty purple to
This
me.
one was planted on the east side of the rattlesnake pole beans.
I really gotta stop slurping. I keep slurping that water. My gosh, it's gonna make me burpy. It's not very healthy.
The rattlesnake pole beans grew faster and taller than these, and for that reason, the Carminat pole beans were shaded in the afternoon and didn't get enough sunshine. These are the Seychelles. I planted this one next to the fence, which caused it to get off to a slow start. Then in the afternoons, it got too much shade from the Cherokee Trail of Tears pole beans. But as you can see, they grow very attractive beans, and they're on the slender size and uniform in size and shape, much like some of the others. The Cherokee Trail of Tears produced a lot of beans, as you can see, and the vines grew very well. This one also produced beans for quite a while. If you look carefully, some of the pods get a little bit of a reddish or purplish tint. This bean has been around for a long time and deserves to be around for a lot longer. Now let's get to the top three. I'll start by saying that some of these beans would have done better if planted in a different location, so they didn't really have a fair shake this time. This was my first time for growing all of these, so I had to make up my mind on what they did in this one season. Coming in at number 3 is Seychelles. This one was in a terrible location.
Is it Seychelles or Seychelles? Or is it more of a Seychelles? What on earth is that? I do that here. Yeah, that. Right there. That right there. What is that? It's really just zoom into that. I can't zoom in anymore. It won't let me. It thinks it can stop me. Oh, wait. Yeah. Okay. Really get that zoomed in. Okay, so there's about 6 pixels there. Yeah, I don't know what that is. Just wondering. Any farmers? Yeah.
For growing, and that held it back quite a bit, or it might have ranked higher. Seychelles is one of the more attractive beans that I've seen. They're real smooth and are all about in that 4 to 6 inch range, and they taste very good. I'll probably be growing this again in a better location. Number 2 out of the top 3 is Cherokee Trail of Tears. This one might not have placed first in any of the judging criteria that I went by, but overall it's just a very solid pole bean. It produces nice sized beans that have good flavor, and as you can see, it has very good productivity.
That's a full harvest of beans, that is, right there. Man, my battery's already gone down 9% in the past 7 minutes. I should probably close out all the apps.
It also has very good vigor and staying power. I'm kind of a history buff, and this bean even has that going for it. You might notice that they're piled on top of some Monte Gusto. This is a later harvest. Before we get to number 1, let us know what your favorite pole bean is, and I'm sure other folks would also be interested in hearing that. Our number 1 is Monte Gusto. We really like the flavor of this one, the texture of it, and it grows lots and lots of beans. Going strictly on productivity, this one was the most productive, with number 2 being the rattlesnake. Some of this is just personal preference, and as I mentioned before, in a different growing season and in different locations.
Alright. Thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, but don't forget to subscribe to Midwest Gardener. He's got all sorts of wonderful plant videos and gardening stuff. He might actually have cooking stuff. I don't know. So check him out. Subscribe to him. I have not signed in. Alright. Well, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to this guy.